Now I think we come to finish or complete this reading of this book, The Foundations of Buddhism. I think today we can finish the whole thing, and we are in the chapter 10, Evolved Traditions of Buddhism, South, East, North, and West. I think last time we have covered, I think that, what is that? Just before the Chan Buddhism, I guess. No.
Just right before.
Just right before the Chan Buddhism, or the school of East Asian Buddhism. Well, but I said that's because in order to finish the whole thing, but even though it's not really a lot, but I guess, I don't know whether we should read paragraph by paragraph. I think, are we going to start on page 259 to last the schools of the East Asian Buddhism?
61.
Yeah, I think we finished that. That's right, the Chan Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the case, I think we can just read a little bit. Why don't we just read the first? What is a Chan Buddhism or a Zen Buddhism? Yeah.
Okay. The term Chan, Japanese Zen, derives from the Sanskrit dhyana, which, as we have seen, is used in Indian Buddhist theory to designate the attainment of a deep state of peace by the means of calm meditation. The term comes to refer to one of the important schools of East Asian Buddhism. Chan tradition looks to the legendary figure of the Indian monk Bodhidharma, who was said to have come east in the 5th or 6th century CE as its first patriarch. But it is likely that the roots of Chan's life further back in Chinese Buddhist history was the interest shown in meditation practice by such figures as Dao An, Hui Yuan, and Dao Shen.
Okay.
Chan tradition has it that beginning with Bodhidharma, the lineage of teaching and the title of patriarch passed from master to pupil. The transmission to the 6th patriarch, however, became the object of dispute. Originally, it was assumed to have passed to Sheng Xiu, but in 734, this succession was challenged by a southern monk named Sheng Hui, who claimed that, in fact, Huineng had been the true 6th patriarch. Shen Hui and his southern school of Chan were the effective winners of the dispute, with Huineng now looked upon as the second founder of Chan.
Shen Hui was an advocate of the doctrine of sudden awakening, and one of the things that he challenged Shen Hui with was teaching a doctrine of gradual awakening. This dispute over whether awakening should be regarded as a gradual process or a sudden event was not confined to Chan circles, but was a question that preoccupied Chinese Buddhism from an early date. To some extent, the problem reflects the old Abhidharma discussion over the question of whether, at the time of awakening, the Four Noble Truths are seen gradually, as the Sarvasvadin argued, or in a single event, as the Theravadin, among others, argued. Ultimate truth is not something one can see part of. One either see it complete or not at all. Yet, the account of the Bodhisattva path the Chinese inherited from India details various stages with definite attachments to attainments and points of no return. After Shen Hui, Chan became very much associated with a sudden awakening view.
Okay.
Bodhidharma is said to have emphasized the teaching of the Lankavatara Sutta, and theoretically, basis of a Chan centered on the notion of the Tathagata and the emptiness as pointing beyond all conceptual forms of thought. Our innermost nature is simply the Buddha nature. 佛性, which is to be realized in a direct and a certain experience of inner awakening. Chan tradition has a marked tendency to be critical of conventional theory and discursive philosophy, which it sees as cluttering the mind and creating obstacle to direct experience. Emphasis is put on just sitting in meditation, 坐禅, the carrying out of ordinary routine tasks and the all-important instruction of the Chan master. Chan's own considerable literary and intellectual tradition centers on the story of the saints and the deeds of these Chan masters, who may be portrayed as behaving in unexpected and spontaneous ways and responding to questions with apparent non-sequitur and riddles, 公案, in order to draw their pupils from their habitual patterns of thought and founding them an awakening experience.
Yeah, you can start with a question.
Question: if a man has his head shaved, wears a monk's robe, and takes the shelter Buddha gives, why then should he not be recognized as one who is aware of Buddha? Master, it is not as good to have something as to have nothing. Although as many as 5 different Chan schools had emerged by the 9th century, only 2 of these remained important after the government suppression of Buddhist monasticism in 842 to 845. The Linji, Japanese
Rinzai.
and
曹洞.
Japanese Soto. The former placed particular emphasis on the paradoxical riddle of the Gong'an and the master's bizarre behavior. The latter placed more emphasis on formal sitting meditation. In Japan, it is associated with the important figure of Dogen.
Okay. All right. I think because last time we introduced about what is have a general understanding in the present time that you still find some Buddhism there. You still find Buddhism in those countries. For example, like China, we also talk about China, and we also talk about how Buddhism come to China as well as Japan and so forth. And now we just come to addressing something about. It's just a very, very simple introductory, because this is not serving as a really comprehensive study, but just introductory for the Chan Buddhism. So I guess it's quite a good pictures about. Certainly there are a lot of, if you want to read about Chan Buddhism and you want to do research, maybe more than 100 books in English, more than, to read. This is not a small subject as such, but it's always very important when you begin to learn this subject seriously, then of course you must first have a big picture first, and then later you may not agree or disagree or whatever, but you somehow have a big picture, which less controversial pictures. Yeah. Certainly we know the word Chan, Chan, the word is Chana. It's from original word Chana or Chanzhi or Chanding, right? The word, but Chanding even is the Ding is a Chinese, but original Dhyana, literally we translate Chana. So when you say Chanzhong or Zen Buddhism, Zen the word is, or the Chan now in Chinese, it means Chan. Okay. Although I'm not necessarily agree here, there's a little word saying that it say that the attainment of the deep state of peace by means of calm meditation, because it seems like this is certainly influenced by, even look at early Buddhism, when you say that the Chan, the so-called the dhyana, this kind of, or jhana in Pali, dhyana in Sanskrit, the dhyana state is it's kind of like placed by means of calm meditation. But sometimes when you look at Agama, Sutra, not necessarily always represent in such a way. But this is just, I a little disagree. I mean, I can understand this as an outlook, right? He cannot write everything, and if you write so much like there, and then you get confused. But generally, yes, in understand, when you learn Buddhism, we understand the chan mean concentration. That's a kind of state of concentration, from the concentration. That's how a general understanding. But even though, as I said, sometimes the term cannot be restricted in such a way. Many things is the same thing. Like when you say, I understand. The word understand can be very complicated, right? But anyway, so at first we just know you understand mean you must read something, you heard something, or you think of something, right? But can understand be beyond that, or and so forth. Anyway, of course, the other thing is Chan Buddhism is important. We must know the name called Bodhidharma, the Bodhidharma, the Bodhidharma. So, and when I was in Guangzhou, so of course, if you really visit Guangzhou, because Bodhidharma where it landed, they have the mark there. Of course, they believe it really is really true. Bodhidharma landed in where, and then he also, where he started to, he met someone on, somebody sit there and he have a conversation. So now in Guangzhou, certainly it's still become one of very important sites to visit. Particularly if you are really interested in the Chinese Buddhism, of course, that's really important site there. And he, but for sure, because it's said that Bodhidharma arrived, of course, legendary said that he arrived with standing on one of the straw, kind of leaf. And he could just stand there and he cross over the India and then come to China. That's how it, 一苇渡家嘛, huh? So that's how it's said. But however, even if we want to put away this legendary, but certainly we kind of understand he come from the seaside, from the seaport, because at that time the Guangzhou in a certain part of it, in that area is very important seaport there. So actually this September I'm going to give the talk is, even though it's not really the Bodhidharma, because I know I don't want to talk there, otherwise it's, a lot of people still like to believe a legendary thing, But when it comes to scholarly, we are not totally reject that, but we still have to put that aside, We have to base on, that's what means the critical study, Okay. Anyway, but there are lots of, certainly a lot of Greek masters in earlier time, even before the Chan, like Zhendi Fa Shi, Paramata, and a lot, I cannot remember certainly, more than 30 monks, very famous monks, they actually arrived in Guangzhou, in that time, at that time. Anyway, okay, and the other thing is about, of course, the Chan history. We don't have much record about the Patrick. Of course, there's a legend that said that when before he passed away, the Bodhidharma, before the Master Bodhidharma passed away, he predict that. So that's one 一花开五叶, 一花开五叶嘛, that's a word. Say one flower, how to say? Maybe one flower with five petals, maybe something like that. But in other words, however, we know that until the sixth Patrick, it was quite controversial because the way that suddenly, traditionally, the lineage been handed down, supposed to be like someone who are really in the monastery for a long time and is senior monast, someone who have been in that system long time. But Huiren came from Guangdong Shen, that in those days they think that some kind of person, people that are not very educated. Anyway, and so, and also not like he been in the monastery for a long time, like really have a systematical study there and so forth. But suddenly the lineage is passed out to him. Certainly that certainly is very controversial. And some of the story we've been said, I'm not going to say that, but those who are interested, a lot of book about this. Okay. And I'm sure even in Chinese, it's always like to talk those stories again and again and again. So, but certainly it's for. I find this passage very interesting because one passage here is very interesting. Actually, the Shen Hui, he also come from a southern part, but I don't know where about. Even though he's a southern part of monk, but even though he lived there in the north, China. So sometimes this is. I don't mean that because someone come from a southern part, he really will pass down the lineage to that person. I don't mean that. But that something maybe also means something he have a sympathy on that too. He doesn't think that, everyone who have get enlightened in a way in the Chen tradition has to be really as what in those days called the northern part people thinking, maybe, I guess. That's, but we know that after even Huiren, when he got those, the rope, but it's believed that certain rope is passed out from the previous patriarch and then previous patriarch and so forth. So the Shen Hui actually, not Shen Hui, what is his name? The successor, supposedly. Shen Xiu. And the Shen Xiu, he still teaching his kind of meditation and his teaching and still run a really, really very systematic and powerful system there. But as here I mentioned, later on Chan Buddhism kind of declined. Even afterward it break into 5 schools, only 2 schools remained. But we must bear in mind also, even during the Huiren's time, it doesn't mean that the northern school Chan teaching is gone, but they still survive for a long time. But in other words, it could argue that according to the Huiren's, the 6th patriarch understanding, the northern path is a graduate path, and he himself carry on, of course, what he thinks is the direct way, it's called the Southern Enlightenment. And in study, we must also understand it's certainly quite confirmed already, because from many sources it's quite known that if Bodhidharma as a real figure, he used to use the text called Langa Avadara Sutra to be the text as the basis of training. It's very important you train somebody, and I mean in a so-called, especially when you say the lineage, you cannot say because just based on a teacher. You also must have the text to able to justify your attainment also. So Lanka Avadara, if you are interested, you should have read the Lanka Avadara, because Lanka Avadara 就楞伽经啊哈. So Lanka Avadara, it's the Lanka Avadara Sutra certainly is one of the, you could say, very important yoga sutra. Okay, even though Lanka Avadara in a scholarly study usually will understand it as inclined to be the Tathagata Garbha, 就是如来藏, belong to the 如来藏, the Tathagata Garbha's teaching. However, it still carry a lot of this Yogacara, 就是一切部, the Yogacara system to run. But it's almost like in between, But still, scholarly studies, especially in Japan, as far I remember, they still have a lot of debate, because some say that, basically, some say that Lanka cannot be included in the Yogacara, but rather than just the Tathagata Garbha. So they have all these kind of argument over there. But then certainly we know that later on, the Tathagata Garbha's teachings, that because the Buddha nature is one of the really most important, you could say the main theme of the Tathagata Garbha's school. So, and then so the Buddha nature, 佛性, and this idea, it's certainly is directly spring, the whole concept comes from the Tathagata Garbha. Okay. But of course, this is what in the past I did mention also. My understanding, this is just my personal understanding, even though I might have evidence, because since I'm not doing that research, I could not say in detail. It's even now I always say, even now when you read the Yogacara Bhumi, when you hear the Chinese master nowadays, or even in the past few hundred years, they were trying to explain, there are few exceptions, otherwise they actually trying to explain the Yogacara, 就是一切部, 一切师弟, the Yogacara system in terms of the Tathagata Garbha. But people maybe say, yes, actually they are. To Chinese in general, I'm talking about the scholarly, even like if you train as a traditional Chinese monastic school, they somehow think that the Yuche and the Tathagata Garbha are the one. But only recently they changed the system, only just 220 years. But if people don't have a new resource, in old day, always they don't find that there's a differences at all, because all the explanations are based on the Tathagata Garbha. However, but if you want to follow the Xuanzang Fashi system, it's very clear. You could find evidence very clear. Huiji always criticized that. He always think that why these people are still thinking that way. But of course, Kuiji Fashi always think that he got it directly, really learning from Xuanzang Fashi, and he should be the authority, right, for the understanding. And then Xuanzang Fashi, but according, the Kuiji's, the Cheng Wei Shi Run, Cheng Wei Shi Run was written by the Kuiji, but based on what Xuanzang Fashi directly teach him. And then it's very clear in the first chapter, because according to the Cheng Wei Shi Run, which believe be written by the Indian Greek master with a lot of different master illuminated by Xuanzang Fashi. So saying that, if you have to look whether it's true, certainly the first chapter itself is criticizing that lots of people misunderstood, the Alayana especially, the Alayeshi. The concept of Alayeshi as the Tathagata, which he thinks is completely wrong. That there's a lot of argument in the Cheng Wei Shi Run. Okay. But because from that, if we read that, I learned that also before in the past. We read the whole thing when I was in Harvard. So, and then you do see that it's very clear. Not only Kuiji, sometimes here and there put a little piece and thinking that why you still want to think it that way. But Cheng Wei Shi Run is one of really way to prove that Xuanzang Fashi certainly stand in that way. Say that the Wei Shi it's not the Tathagata. The Alayeshi is not the Tathagata. Okay. Okay, I mean that's for that. But however, why I want to say this way also. Other thing is about the Chan Buddhism. Chan Buddhism certainly based on the Tathagata kind of concept, or maybe you could say they even influence what the Tathagata understanding in China as well. Nowadays, even if you talk about Chinese Buddhism, I have to say actually. There are two schools are very influential. The other one is what we are talking about, the Pure Land. And the one school certainly is a Chan. Not because meditation itself. I don't think lots of people really doing meditation. But the concept, the idea of what is 这个佛性, that kind of concept is really actually highly been promulgated and introduced, this school, into a Chinese, almost every Buddhist in China, So that's, I think it's worth to investigate that, in the future. Yeah, that's the reason why sometimes when you hear other school like Yogacara school or Way Understanding, or maybe even early Buddhism and so forth, you feel a little strange because that's not the way you used to get your information. That's okay. All right, any other comment? Maybe somebody have some other, you don't have to ask question all the time. I mean, you don't necessarily have to ask question, but you can have comment and add some addition you think that you can say. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
On the page 262, second paragraph, it mentioned that the
Abhidharma?
Yeah.
Yeah, because whether the enlightenment is sudden or the graduate, the thing it is, that's why sometimes when we read the letter, we have to be careful. I cannot remember the Sanskrit word suddenly.渐渐的渐怎么写？
三点水，车子的车在一经。
哦，对，谢，对。那时候不是用五键啊。Maybe this is the word 有点不对。
顿跟的顿是金字旁在一
哦，
屯。
不是这个，这个是顿。哦。
立顿的顿
OK
是金字旁的那个顿。
对啊。
一呀。屯。
我不怎么写，你可以写。我会看很久没有写中文字。
你来跟我们学书法吧。
我的字写的不好看吗？以我这种中文的底子，已经不错了，不要这么说我。
调过来。
这我知道，我现在看到了，我这样我就看到，我这因为常常看很少写字的，现在也知道。OK， 是，抱歉，被你的手跟。
顿键的话，两个字都通用，
是
不同的意思
啊。
但是顿跟应该是
那个那个顿键，原来那个字是对的，那个。
Yeah, I know, but then you have to understand sometimes the Chinese can use both words together.
Yes,
Yeah, but as I say, the gun, dun, gun is always using this word.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is actually a big subject. In Abhidhamma, or even in the Sutta, we did mention that there are people who are belong to what we call the blunt faculty, you know, the blunt, B-L-U-N-T, blunt, or something, blunt faculty. And then the sharp faculty. So, but the definition is not necessarily agreeable by even Pali Abhidhamma or even the Sarvasti Abhidhamma also. But whatever is it, but certainly it's also a little different. If I'm not wrong, from the what is the Chanzhong. But of course, we don't know what Chanzhong really mean by that. I mean, people think they know, but actually, in detail, sometimes even not too clear. What does really the Dungan refer to, you know, and the Ligan? It's just generally we understand the Dungan and Ligan refer to someone are not going. This is just a generalization. Believe that in Chan, think that if you cannot have the direct perceiving of the enlightenment, then you are the Dungan, something like that. You are the blunt faculty. But in Abhidhamma and in the Sutta also does not say so. Okay, it's a different way. Anyway, sometimes if I'm not wrong, sometimes even the meaning is completely opposite to the Chinese general way of understanding. Or sometimes we say 顿修 或者渐修 or 顿渐渐渐. So it's referred to, especially in Abhidhamma only. You don't have this term in the Sutta actually, but in the Abhidhamma, it's somehow it's still that believing that during the moment of enlightenment, you are able to see the Four Noble Truths at once. Okay, like in the Pali tradition, they believe that. So by practicing your Paticca-samuppada, the dependent origination, so when you come to a really understanding well, then suddenly you understand the dukkha, the suffering, the cause of suffering, and then the nibbana, that means the cease of the cause of the suffering, that means the nibbana, and the path, leading to the cease of the cause of the suffering. At once you see it. So this is how someone transform, because anunoma, they transform oneself from the normal state into a noble person, right? The senja, to the noble person. But in Sarvastivada do not think that way. Sarvastivada actually, that's why I say because they don't think that way, sometimes the Jian Xiu and Dun Xiu, those definitions could be very different, okay? Sarvastivada don't believe that. Sarvastivada always have to believe that the attendant nibbana is always must be go gradually. Meaning the Four Noble Truths have to see one by one. So for example, if I before entering the become like a first fruit, or the 出果, first fruit, sotapanna, and you must go through at least the 8. I mean, they might have a lot of argument how to go through that. This is not my subject here, but certainly you have to go through. Some people are the person who are very, depend on what kind of person you are, but then you certainly you have to see the suffering, and then you start to see the cause of suffering, and then the disappearing of the cause of suffering. That means you're facing to the no cause of the suffering, and then you know the path, and so forth. But there are people could, unless you are transformed, complete like second fruit or third fruit or what, you might shift your system. Otherwise, you just go through that way. So in other words, we understand. They believe that you understand nibbana. You cannot say I see the nibbana and I simultaneously I see the other three paths. That's a whole deep debate over there. Now this debate actually it does change tremendously even in Abhidhamma. In other words, Pali Buddhism somehow have that kind of belief. They never have the training to ask you to see the Four Noble Truths in a gradual way. I mean, yes, they do have that system there, but they never have put that system into a rigorous application. Okay. And the Sarasvati school put that in a rigorous application. Now, but the funny part is, a lot of Mahayana school, when they disagree with Abhidhamma practice system, or like Sunyata is one of that, right? And they postulate more. They think that's the best way to understand the Nibbana, the best way to achieve Nibbana, even using the dependent origination. But that's the best way. You see, actually, they in some way also against what the Sarasvati understanding. Whoever who reached that path has to go gradually. But here, please understand when I say go gradually, I mean the moment that when you attend Nibbana, you have to go gradually. Okay? The moment that you see Nibbana, it must have a few moments, a few process to see the Nibbana. So it has to go gradually. And that kind of thing, it's not really applied to the Mahayana too. But then, the graduate part still apply to Mahayana. I mean, you need to practice step by steps. Okay, you understand what I mean? Mm-hmm. When we say that graduate, you have to understand the word graduate. You have to practice step by step. But maybe the moment when you attend Nibbana, that it can be just suddenly, okay, and see the whole thing. But in the Sarasvati school, there's no way. You have to do step by step. But then the moment when you see the Nibbana, is also have to go step by step to see one another to reach the Nibbana. Okay?
When you say step by step, does it mean like you're doing different things in the different steps? Or does it just like take time while you're doing the same thing? Like, are you using the same method in each step? It just takes time, or is it different methods?
I mean, this is a long topic. They have divided. Let's say if you want to see the truth of suffering, you have to go through the 4 phases. The phases of why there's a nature of suffering, because it's impermanent. Why is suffering? Because it's suffering. Why is suffering? Or what we call dukkha. Why is dukkha? Because it's emptiness. Why is dukkha? Because it is is no self. Okay. So, and you have to go to the four phases. Only when you practice these 4 phases, then you understand what is the nature of the suffering. Then they have a very meticulous system. In order to reach to that noble truth of the suffering, the noble truth is not just suffering. You can understand suffering in noble life, but in that stage, what is called the noble truth, right? Satya, in the original language. I mean, why this always has to be that noble truth? Because you then start to understand the true thing as a noble truth, what we call, okay, or suffering. So you could pick up one, say that I'm good at the 4, I have to practice a 4, but then I can be just 1 is good for me. For example, in the sunyata, I can be, because I always observe the sunyata, I mean emptiness. I can just observe emptiness is because whatever I observe, I don't see there is not impeded by conditionality, or everything goes with the conditionality. So there's no such a thing called a reality in a way. As an essence there. There's no such one essence there. Now when you find that, well, how do you feel? When I say feel, I'm not saying the feeling, but how do you understand? You have come of knowledge, this is suffering. Dukkha mean oppression, you cannot change it. So it's a kind of different from what the Mahayana understanding of sunyata. But however, in the Sarasvati, this is as a one of the factor. If that you are good at sunyata understanding, then with the sunyata, you could understand the suffering. Okay. Now, there are also 4 phases that can contribute you to understand the cause of suffering. Okay. Okay, I don't want to say that what are the 4, but generally, let's say one of the phases mean you arise. They accumulate, they arise, right? Say that arise is one of the you are very good at understanding the arise. Then you see the now, when you have that kind of understanding of suffering, right, from the sunyata, then you know the noble truth of suffering. Then directly you also see the suffering comes, even though the suffering comes because you have understanding. The suffering comes from because of the craving arise. Right? Right? But then with the earlier knowledge that you understand everything is sunyata, that gives you suffering. So if that is that what is arise, it could be that even also empty. Right? That's why you see the nibbana. But what I want to say that they have a really meticulous system. You look at this first, and then you look at that, and then you start to see the nibbana. From start to see the nibbana, there are also four what we call four akara, or you could say four phases. Let's say I would take one. One phase is wonderful. Okay, then you know without this it's wonderful. Right? Now these are steps. Right? You have to go through that, and then you go to a second. And only when you go to a wonderful, then you know there's no any other path. Only this kind of path. That's the path. Right? Now, but that's the Sarvastivada training. According to the Theravada Pali, it's so complicated. This is not just one bit, you can write a lot, it's a big topic. But generally, according to the Pali, when you have abandoned, mostly Pali are very emphasis on, that's why last time I did give a little talk about abandon. Abandoning is very important. When you see you have been abandoning your defilements, right? When the defilement is abandoned, so then you come to the knowledge, that's the pure one, that's the one. So that's a nibbana. Okay.
It's just like different methods to achieve.
You could say, in early time maybe you could say different method, but now what we understand, sometimes it might be. That's the reason why some Mahayana, when they came up, they learn this very well already. They know this, their problem, their argument, their what. They sometimes think, why you have this different method? It's because you first learn this method and you only hone on this method. That's why, based on this kind of teachings you got, you are hooked up with that kind of teaching. So that's why your system becomes in such a way. Whether it's true or not, we are not hired to say, I don't know. But certainly some Mahayana was certainly postulate this idea in this again with Abhidhamma in such a way. Okay. Okay. All right, let's just move on because we're going to finish the book. We can, when we have time, we can talk something more. Yeah. Now that's a Chan Buddhism. Now we come to the Pure Land Buddhism. Yes.
What does 佛性 really mean, and what does it mean by the experience of inner awakening? Like, what does that refer to specifically?
Ooh. Oh no, that's a big topic. Satori is in Japanese. It's always talk about Satori. Ooh, it's a really big topic. I would suggest you certainly read that. I myself, one thing of course is that later on, especially in China, I mean, I don't mean only that, but certainly become popular is the Diamond Sutra. That's the way they understand. Then you certainly come to that understanding of the original pureness is there. So you are, you know.
What is that in relations to seeing?
You can understand here, even the Chinese term is clear. It's not something just experience, but you kind of understand the thing already. Yeah.
Is that the same as like seeing the Four Noble Truths or seeing Nibbana? Or
in the Chan Buddhism, not necessarily they would talk about that. But this is how I thought. I don't know. Because since Chan Buddhism, earlier time, they have a lot of, but why I doubt that? Because if you look at the Chinese source, what is his name? Tentai School's teacher, Hui Si. Actually, he talked about Four Noble Truths a lot. And the Satipatthana, I mean the 4 Nian Chu. I mean, Guan Shen, Guan Xin, Guan Shou, Guan. He talked a lot that. So that's what he say that, because the Chan Buddhism, even in early time, we have 5 schools there, but now they disappear, only 2 remain. And whether even the earlier 2 remain in the earlier form, how they are, I sometimes suspect whether still something, everything is passed out or not. We don't know, right? And particularly, I mean, there's a saying, general saying, the Chinese people, the more they learn, they like it. They like more simple. They don't like become more complicated. So, like a kung fu, they have a complicated. They always, become simplifying. I mean, I don't know, but that's how I say. I don't know how true. But then the other Chinese are not necessarily like that. They really have must everything in detail. But anyway, so but if it based on the Hui Shi, we certainly know the Chan Buddhism certainly and highly respect Hui Shi in early time. Even though later on the Chan tradition say that their earlier teacher is Bodhidharma. So that's why from that perspective, you might be just trying to understand how this Lankavatara really, because Lankavatara is trying to also solve one problem, which in the Nikaya doesn't, he think that is not good way, but Lankavatara as a Mahayana text, trying to explain that's what really the Buddha mean. So in here you could find there's a lot of word called mi-yi in Sanskrit. If you look at Sanskrit term mi-yi, especially if you learn the Tibetan Buddhism, always this mi-yi is always there. Mi-yi doesn't mean secret teaching. A lot of people translate wrong. It actually means it's the no. In Sanskrit, no. It's extensive. No. It means like mi-yi. It's kind of like carry with the intention. I forgot there's a particular English term, but the meaning means carry with the intention. Say that, like maybe I would say, can you go out, give me a water, right? So some people think that maybe I just say ask you to give me a water, right? It's just because I'm thirsty, I want water. But a lot of people can misunderstand this remark. Maybe I ask you to go out to give me a water. So you could say, I carry intention, I want you just to be outside so that I can talk some secret, something to them. Then you can, be away. You know what I'm saying? So that statement, you don't just read that directly in such a way, but it's always must understand his intention, why the way it's saying. That's mean by me. And of course, that certainly in Mahayana later on is really important. And you think that the Nikaya, some sutra record, is really profound teachings that which talk about the Buddha, really what the Buddha understand is, that which they believe, of course, Arahant wouldn't understand. So that's why when the Buddha says such a way, Arahant only can understand like, okay, I ask you go out to take the water. But actually, it carries the meaning, I want you to be absent for that moment. Okay. Anyway, go to read the Lankavatara. It's really interesting. Yeah. All right. I do have the Lankavatara here. Yeah. Now, since we mentioned that, I would joke. I just now I joke. Actually, I forgot this kept in your house. No wonder now you can easily get your doctor degree. This one actually is not the real one. It's an imitation. If I had a real one, I would be. We don't have to worry about the Zen Meditation Center anymore. I don't. But this is a copy one. But this is really copy, try to exactly as it is. Because this is, you can see in the palace, Qing dynasty, Chen Nonghuang, during his time, this is all his correction, only for the king. Okay, that's why I say I don't have the real one. Never have the real one. But still, it's wonderful to look at. This is the Lankavatara, okay? It's the iron. Of course, the cover is made of iron. If you look at this decoration and so forth. But this complete imitate exactly, So this is how they take out the sutra. But this is not. That's the sutra. They try to make everything, and this you could see the sutra is painted in gold. Okay, of course this is the Peter he was teaching to the Bodhisattva and even some Arahant, they are mostly the Bodhisattva of this Lankavatara Sutra, Ren Xie Jing. Now, and then you will see there's some chops here. Of course, this is not a real one. If there's a real one, and it's said that the chop is put here. It's always indicate the Chen Huan, the king, the emperor itself. When he finished that chapter, he would just make a chop over there. You can pass down and have a look. Or you can do one. Yeah.
Are these engravings made of gold in these books?
No, not made of gold. It's were using the gold plate to write.
Right.
Original.
Right.
Yeah.
But are these made of gold? Like, are these like
Yeah.
gold in them?
Yeah. But this one is not. I think this is only modern technology. I cannot tell you, maybe yes. I was very fortunate. I'm joking. I don't know. I hope yes. Yes. Yeah.
Is it a whole metal box contains one set of
Just one. This just the one sutra. You know the
one sutra?
old day the Chinese they use this way to. That's how. Yeah. And then another sutra is very important, Yuan Jue Jin. So, but you could see that I guess that sutra seemingly more important than this one because, I mean, as a cover, because at least this is kind of.
This is Yuan Jue?
Yeah, Yuan Jue Jin.
It's good.
Yeah.
But the characteristics, I mean, the
No, yeah, people are right. You could see the different calligraphy from there.
it's all modern.
It looks like
Yeah,
the
more
king
handwrite
never
during the
read-
Qing dynasty.
Looks like the king never read this book, which is the second book. Maybe he stopped.
No, maybe that's what they say, but I think
No stamps.
maybe
There's only one stamp in the beginning. and
you
one
never
stamp
know.
after.
You never know. Maybe he just want to stamp. I can have a look. Yeah, maybe he just wanted to stamp the beginning. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. He only stamped the beginning.
Yeah, maybe just stamp the beginning. Yeah. But look, the cover was made of the
这里面这个简体字就显然不会写。
Super high quality.
So now you know that how in ancient time the people, not ancient, even Qing dynasty, how they really take care of this. Yeah,
The paper is so pretty.
it's pretty. It's
In
really
Qing
pretty.
Dynasty, they can make this
Yeah,
paper?
well, of course. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And those are
好，对啊。
supposed to everyone write.
做出这种纸。
Yeah, everyone had to copy. Must be the famous people there to write this, I'm sure. But yeah, did they write down the name who write it?
是啊，监护部尚书同中书名上
Yeah, yes, yeah.
维修术。
你的字写的
This one.
大翻广佛华圆觉经 general we say that.
Very good. Very
Yeah.
good. Even the
Yuan Jue Jin certainly is very important in Chinese Buddhism as well because it's, Chinese Buddhism always prefer something less critical, but more all-rounded understanding. So that it's also Yuan Jue Jin still belong to the Tathagata system, 就是 如来藏 system. But they
wording is very beautiful.
Yeah.
So is this a translation from like a Pali source? Or
No. They are completely different. The Pali source doesn't have those. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
gotcha. So this is like,
I read this actually before I become a monk. We usually you have to learn all these basic text.
does that mean
Yeah.
a Chinese person wrote this? Or
No. It's believed translate from Sanskrit.
Oh,
Some texts, even in China in old day, this is I think you didn't because you were not here last time. The Chinese have a long process in the past history that sometimes they have to how to define the text is really apocryphal or the what we call the real text or the apocryphal text. And then Daoan, for example, Daoan, and even before Daoan Fashi in earlier time, during the 5th century, 400 something, they even, because like in America, let's say one day, suddenly the emperor or you say the government is interested to really know what the Buddhist text is about. You have so many different translations. And some internet have a lot of saying it's not true or become authentic than the other really true text too, right? Because they were widespread so much. And a lot of saying. So like that, and then it was a long process. Even in the old day, the Chinese always have a lot of difficult work to justify which text should be put in the catalog, had to be cataloged understand as a Buddha teaching, or which is, okay, we keep it there because too popular to miss, you know. And it carry maybe the teachings well, but it just in many ways. That's actually not, I didn't say it, you know, they even reread the old source, they mention that also, yeah.
So one more question. When you say Chan Buddhism doesn't really have the system of Nibbana?
No, did I say that?
Four Noble Truths?
No, I didn't say that.
Oh, because I was asking how does the experience of inner awakening compare with the Four Noble Truths system? I think I might have understood. I think
that's why I say that way understand that may be the best. You have to go through, in terms of the textual study, you have to go through what the Tathagata Garbha understanding. To Ru Lai Chan understanding. And as a Mahayana, yeah. But as I argue, but Hui Si Fa Shi, even the Tathagata Garbha system or understanding is still, during the time, in early time, it was always there already. But of course, we have no really clear information whether he did learn the Tathagata Garbha, but it's no doubt that he certainly read a lot. Whether he was under that training or not before, we don't know, okay? But like him, certainly he was based on not that kind of system. I won't say not. Actually, what he's writing, he also have this Tathagata Garbha understanding too. But he also used a Satipatthana and also the Four Noble Truths, you know.
So the inner awakening.
Anyway, I know this. Come on.
system?
This is not one day easy, 2 day subject.
It's like when friends ask me like, oh, what does awakening mean in Zen Buddhism or whatever? Like, I'm always like, I don't know. Because
even nowadays, many people give a different answer also. You know, as I say, I cannot tell you about experience because experience is, how can you argue with the experience? But only from the textual understanding, that's what we can do only. Okay? So, all right. All right, let's come to the Pure Land Buddhism, can we? Who is going next one? You? Mm.
As we saw in the opening chapter, the Buddha has always been seen as possessor of incomparable powers and as the incomparable teacher of the Dharma. For earliest Buddhism, the actual person of Buddha is no longer directly accessible after his final parinibbana, and the devotion to the Buddha centered on the worship of his relics, the recollection of his qualities. Buddha knows
Smriti.
And perhaps also visualization. Such practices clearly were felt to bring one in some sense closer to the presence of Buddha. Early Buddhism also knew of
Maitreya,
Mettaya, the next Buddha, who at present waits in the Tusita heaven, the aspiration to be reborn at the time when Maitreya will teach the Dharma may have become part of Buddhist practice early on. With the rise of the Mahayana came the idea that Buddhas are at present teaching in other parts of the universe in their own special Buddha fields or pure lands, where the conditions for the practice of the Dharma are extremely favorable. With this came the aspiration to be reborn in these pure lands. The inspiration for Chinese and Japanese Pure Land Buddhism is provided by 3 sutras, the larger and the smaller Sukhavati, Vyuha, Vision of the Ring of Happiness, and the Amitabhudhyana, Meditation on the Buddha of Boundless Life. The 2 former are of Indian origin, while the last may have been composed in Central Asia or China.
I think we can leave some to others to read. Can you want to continue the reading? Otherwise, too long for you. Yeah.
These truths tell of the Pure Land of the Buddhism,
of the Buddha Amitabha.
Buddha Amitabha, of the Amitayus, known in Japanese as
Amida.
The particular focus of East Asia, Asian Pure Land Buddhism, become the vow of Amitabha in the Sukha
Vati.
to bring to his Pure Land after death anyone who sincerely call on his name. The characteristics practice of the Pure Land Buddhism advocate in the writings of such master as
Tanwan,
Tanwan and
Daozhou.
Daozhou and
Shandao.
is known as Nian Fo, calling on the uttering the name of the Buddha. Also associated with the school is preoccupation with the old Indian idea that the practice of the Buddha teaching must pass through successive periods of the decline and eventually disappear. This lead to emphasis on the fruitfully of expecting to be able by one's own efforts to develop the good conduct and the meditation necessary for awakening in the final days of Dharma. Better to aspire to rebirth in Amitabha Pure Land. The eventual development in Japan was the doctrine of grace associated above all with the figure of
Shinran.
Founder of the true Pure Land school. It is not one own power, but the power of the other. The grace of Amitabha that is effective in bringing one to his Pure Land.
Okay, thank you. So, and then one of the certainly, nowadays I would say the most influential Buddhist school in China is the Pure Land school. Okay, and then of course, one of the important thing about, a few of the important thing is that they think that we cannot understand the Buddha actually just pass away, like Parinibbana, but actually he could be other Buddhas, or lots of Buddhas still in other different universes, And one of them is Amitabha Buddha. So I think that when you learn this in English medium, so there are few times is very, usually people don't like to do translations. One thing, Sanskrit is very short in that term. Like we say Amitabha, in China of course you call Amitabha, and so forth. Different Vietnamese pronounce it differently. Aitofut maybe, something like that. But in Sanskrit you have two words. One's Amitabha or Amidayos. Okay, because Amitabha, it's maybe nowadays of Chinese preferring way of pronunciation. Amidayos refer to Ayus is something. That's why Chinese translate as 无量寿佛, because Ayus mean the age, like the soul. So both are works. But if you look at the Sanskrit text now, they more use Amitabha. Okay, and but how to practice Amitabha here? He didn't say much. But then normally it's believed in earlier time Huiyuan. When Lu San Jie, so actually he's based on a meditation and walking meditation. If you look at his writing, he's saying, but then certain, that's why some Amitabha school, even in China, some they recognize him as the first patriarch, patriarch of the, how to say, of the Pure Land school, but some they don't. I guess earlier time they noticed that because they practice quite different from the Huiyuan Fashi, Lu San Jie. Because Huiyuan Fashi basically much based on, it's very clear, based on the, we did mention maybe in the earlier time, the Bozhou Sami Jing, that he was based on. But then later, like Sandao, particularly Sandao, Daozhong, Tanwan, it's Tanwan even, it's also Tanwan and Sandao. It's very clear they kind of like have a it looks very different from the way he emphasizes how to practice the Amit Pure Land School, quite different. I won't say quite, just at least somewhat different from the Huiyuan. And then the Japan also have highly influenced. I somehow suspect actually a lot of nowadays we know in Taiwan, for example, the Pure Land way of doing is, there were some people writing that paper, not me, thinking that actually they were influenced by Japan system, like Tanwan, or he's very famous, Xinran, he's an original Chinese, but he wanted to go to Japan. At the end, he established the Pure Land School in Japan. And he have written many very, because why I want to say that if you can read his original work, you will find what he said is very similar to what you always heard. So, okay. Anyway, but it's very important in that Pure Land School, unlike like a Chan Buddhism, right? It's very much about how you can awake. But here, it's about, you are in the Mofa Shidai, the Mapo in Japanese, in Chinese called Mofa. What is it? The declining, they call it declining stage of the Dharma period. So to get enlightenment is almost impossible. So that's why you have to base on the other Buddha's power, like Amitabha Buddha. So that's what it said based on Tariki, mean the power of the other. Just a Tali in Chinese, Tariki. In Japanese is pronounced Tariki, mean Tali. So the grace of the Amitabha. So that's the Pure Land School, the main teachings of the Pure Land School, and that's what the main focus of Pure Land School. Okay. All right, now I guess because of time reason, why don't we take a break? And I think we are not going to read it. We'll just simply go through a little bit the main thing about Tentai and Huayan and Nichiren, and then we have to, because we need to finish this book today. Okay. I need to jump a little bit. Why don't we just break, have 5-minute break? Usually 10, but now, unfortunately, just only 5. I will see you in 5 minutes. Yeah. Okay.